Hey, greetings, everyone. Lieutenant Colonel Alan West here. Welcome to the Steadfast and Loyal podcast.
You gotta light 'em up before they burn it down. Better dig deep, put 'em in the ground. Blood on their hands, they're hellbound. Save us all. They're gonna burn it down. Save us all before they burn it down.
Hey, greetings, everyone. Lieutenant Colonel Alan West here. Welcome back to the Steadfast and Loyal podcast. There's a lot of talk about this, January 6th thing, and I find it kind of, I don't know, hypocritical that groups like Antifa can go out and burn down federal buildings and attack law enforcement officers, and they get a pass. But when you look at the lives that were affected through this whole, let's call it a charade. Now, were there some people that probably should have been held accountable for actions? Yeah, but that goes on both sides, really. And so, what we wanted to do was have a discussion with someone that was wrongfully targeted and is still fighting to restore her life and maybe her liberty as well. And that person is a neighbor of mine from right here in Dallas, and that's Jenna Ryan. Jenna Ryan is a real estate broker, author, and constitutional advocate who rose to national prominence following January the 6th of 2021. In the years since, she has become a central figure in the fight against government-coordinated censorship and financial deplatforming. Jenna is currently representing herself in a landmark civil rights case against PayPal, alleging constitutional violations in coordination with federal agencies. Her story is one of personal loss, legal courage, and a powerful stand for free speech and the real due process in America, not due process for criminal and legal immigrants, but for American citizens. Jenna Ryan, thank you for being with us here at the Steadfast and Loyal podcast. First of all, kind of give the audience an understanding about your background and kind of lead us up to what inspired you to be up there in Washington, D.C. on that day.
Well, I went to Washington, D.C. completely naive, thinking that I was protesting for election integrity and ended up getting caught up in a quagmire of lies, accusations, censorship, and just complete becoming a scapegoat for the system and really attacked by the government through the weaponization of the federal government and the justice system. And so my crime was relatively small. I was pretty much I think they say the least of all the Capitol riot offenders. However, I was displayed throughout the media without due process as one of the most violent criminals in the whole thing. Whenever I walked in to the Capitol for 2 minutes, said, Jesus, Jesus. And then I said, I don't, and there was a police officer standing next to me. And then I go, I don't want to be in here, and walked out. Then I was hunted down by the FBI, and they publicly alerted the media, raided my house, took my cell phone, computers, and MAGA hat. It was very political, and then proceeded to make me the pariah for the public as an example of what happens when you exercise your First Amendment right to free speech. So I was wrongfully charged. I was thrown in prison ultimately for 60 days for peaceful protesting. And I'm currently battling on multiple fronts to clear the record and also hold people accountable for what they did to me.
So let's kind of unpackage everything that you just introduced to us. Were you ever a politically active person before this, or, all of a sudden you had an epiphany, an awakening moment?
I was just very concerned about the election
Mhm.
and how it went down. And I was very concerned with what was happening. And so I was contacted by someone to go on a jet to the Capitol. I still do not know if that was the FBI itself. I have my doubts. So, I mean, it was just really odd how it all happened. So I was completely swept away and set up, in my opinion. And I'm keeping that, I'm putting that all on the record in a situation where they needed to do something to make us demonize Trump supporters. And so they used me as like the central focal point to do that. And I was naive and did not know how to handle media. I didn't realize there were people that would do that. So I handled it all wrong. And I'll admit, but at the same time, they took my words and really screwed it up. So, as far as being politically active, no, I sold real estate. And during election year, if it was an election time, I would post about elections. But usually I would just sell real estate and be happy. At this point, I was just invited to go in a private jet to January 6th. And I went, and it ended up being something that was way, I believe, coordinated. And then I was blamed for being like, they continuously displayed images of my face next to these violent things that were happening that I was not even near. And I was, loud and proud. And I said USA. And I said, I was preaching on the Capitol steps. And, you know, um, but they took, they really, they prosecuted and persecuted me. So I was really steamrolled by all systems, including the federal government, big tech, social media websites. I was absolutely bombarded with phone calls night and day, death threats, emails. They wanted my license taken away. They wanted me to be beaten in prison. They all wanted me imprisoned. And ultimately, that's what happened. But in order to get me there, they had to lie on the record to the judge, and the judge had to accept those lies. So I experienced the full weight of the weaponization of the federal government.
Share with people what it was like to have the FBI raid your home when you're a person that, as you just articulated, you just walked in, spent a couple of minutes, said, I don't want to be here, and you walked out. And now you get an FBI raid instead of just someone calling saying, hey, can I ask you a couple of questions? What time did this raid happen?
So it happened. Well, I didn't even really feel that I did anything wrong because I walked in and walked out next to a cop, and I had seen other people doing bad things. So, in my opinion, I didn't think I did anything wrong. But everybody was like, the FBI is going to get you. And I believe it was bots. I believe it was government coordinated attacks. And there were just all these people demanding my arrest. And I was like, what? And then I got a call one morning, and they said, you're being arrested today. And that was just a whole entire episode in and of itself. Meanwhile, I ended up turning myself in later that afternoon, and they said, we need to go to your house. And so I gave him I said, my key is in my car. You can go ahead and go to my house. And he goes, if you don't tell me if you don't let me in, I'm going to have to bust the door down. And I said, the key is in my car. I was so calm because I had no idea what was in store for me. I was very cooperative, overly so. If that happened to me again, I think I would be a little bit more defiant. But I was like, here's my phone. I promised I didn't do anything. And for the next year, I just spent basically just really in a place of submission to this government because I hadn't had a speeding ticket in 10 years, and I didn't really do anything. And I felt ultimately that would come out. However, it didn't. It just got worse.
We just recently saw a Supreme Court decision, and we have these district level judges talking about those people that are here, illegal immigrants that are also doing crimes, deserve due process. How does that make you feel when you look at the episode that you had to go through?
It makes me feel very attacked and very victimized by the federal government. And it's very unequal that people are just allowed to come into our borders and pour in, yet they're raiding my house. Like, okay. And so, really, it is an attack on free speech. It's an attack on political dissent. And so, they don't want people to exercise their right to object to what the government is doing. And they wanted to silence any opposition to the new presidency because they didn't want anybody talking about election fraud or anything about the election. And that was something that I was very vocal about on Twitter. And they wanted to use someone as an example, like an actress in a movie that I didn't know I was in, as here's what's happened. Here's what happens to you whenever you talk about election fraud. Your life is going to be destroyed. And my life was, and still to this day, every day, I am dealing with the ramifications of the reputational damage that they did to me and displayed me as someone that I am not. It is so unbelievably painful emotionally to be perceived by others as something that you're not and someone that you're not. And it affects my life every single day. And that is why I fight so hard. And I'm making progress, like with the PayPal case. I'm actually making progress. No one will represent me. I am pro se. The systems that have come down against me are so powerful that there's not really an attorney that's willing to put their life on the line and their firm on the line to go after these big players that I have to deal with. So I have sharpened my skills and started fighting back legally. And surprisingly, I am making massive progress. It's amazing.
Let's talk about that case because I found it pretty interesting that someone like a Mahmoud Khalil, who is in this country as a guest, but is inciting violence on our college and university campuses, supporting a known terrorist organization. Everyone wants to rush to defend him legally when he does not have legal rights and he should be deported out of this country. But yet you don't have American lawyers that want to stand beside you. Talk about this case that you have, brought against PayPal and others to restore your financial reputation and things of that nature. How did this get started?
Well, what happened was once I figured everything out, so I was canceled completely from society. So I ended up having to figure that out. And what I discovered was that our federal government used PayPal, the financial institution, to come against me and cancel me. So what happened is I had a fundraiser. I'd been with PayPal for many years, since 2006. I raised $200, and within hours, I received a notice from PayPal that they were canceling me. And I was mortified because at the time I was also being attacked from all directions, including the FBI. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I told my mother, I said, I don't want anyone to know about this because it will harm my business. And next thing you know, within 44 minutes, PayPal leaked it to the media. So they leaked it to the media, and the entire media turned into 28 articles, which is not lawful. It was a lawful fundraiser, but they accused me of being unlawful. And it went into 28 mainstream media outlets. And by the next day, I was canceled from banks, Facebook, Instagram, my entire life. I was kicked out of my business office. It just took it to a whole nother level, and it was in lockstep with the federal government. So the FBI was publicizing the raid of my home. They called the media, and then within days, PayPal canceled me, called the media, and then I later found out that all adverse media like that ends up going into a database
Mhm.
that is a censorship database where they are being forced by the federal government to cancel people with adverse media. So I found out all this stuff, and that is actually a civil rights violation.
Yeah.
And I found in all that out. And then they had the Jim Jordan did this incredible investigation, congressional investigation in December. And so I've been sitting in, so basically, because I clicked accept in 2006 on PayPal's website, when I filed suit 3 years ago or in 2022, PayPal put me in an immediate arbitration. And the judge in Sherman decided that, I deserved arbitration, which is totally, I'm so appalled by that. But that was, during a different political environment. And so I've been in arbitration prison, and I've just been waiting on God and waiting. I just knew, they can't dismiss the case because it's a valid case, but they've got me in an arbitration prison. No attorney wants to take someone who's in arbitration prison. And so, but the only thing that can break it is new evidence. So Jim Jordan did this groundbreaking investigation that came out in December 2024 that showed that the previous administration was telling the banks, including PayPal,
Mhm.
and PayPal's on the congressional report, that they needed to do something about people that were raising money for Trump supporters. That they needed to stop Trump supporters from making money because it isn't public, but we were deemed domestic terrorists. And not only domestic terrorists, but domestic violent terrorists. So it's a huge gaslighting campaign. And that's the weaponization part. So PayPal was just reacting in lockstep with the government willfully to maliciously, in my opinion, to stop people from raising money that supported Trump. And so they saw my fundraiser and thought, shut her down immediately. And because I could have raised $1 million or whatever, they were advertising me everywhere. But they wanted me infamous and broke, and they wanted me with no job, no bank, and they got that. And so that is a constitutional claim. And once President Trump got into office, I realized that I may have a better chance in this case. And then you have the AI that is now so strong. So I started going in and researching and finding that you cannot, it's not lawful to arbitrate constitutional claims.
Mhm.
So that doesn't fit. And also the state action, the fact that PayPal was working in conjunction with the United States government to cancel me in order to achieve their goals of demonizing Trump supporters, that's really not arbitrable. And so I'm in a arbitration prison unlawfully in my, it's not right. So I filed my new claims and used that congressional report as evidence. I have to go overboard when you're pro se. You have to really provide evidence.
Yeah.
So I provided 48 exhibits, and the judge and then PayPal wouldn't answer. And so when a company doesn't answer your complaint, it goes into default. And so I filed a default judgment for $85 million against PayPal. And that includes my personal losses as well as punitive damages. And the judge stepped in sua sponte without PayPal even having to prepare a motion or anything, and struck me down. I mean, they didn't fully rule on it yet, but stopped me on a technicality and let PayPal off on a technicality. So PayPal has not been required to answer these claims yet, but I will make sure that they do. And every day my case is getting stronger, and it's about censorship. It's about financial censorship of conservatives or anyone who is against the government. And they're going to answer these claims, and they're stalling. And the sad part is that the judges in Sherman are actually facilitating the stall. It's like they did not expect.
Now, let me just
I'm
interject.
sorry.
When you say
Yeah.
Sherman, you're talking about Sherman, Texas.
Yes, sir.
So we've got judges in Sherman, Texas, that are issuing rulings against a citizen here in the state of Texas,
That are doing what?
that are issuing, decisions and rulings against you as an American citizen and a citizen here in the state of Texas.
They are protecting PayPal. This is a federal judge, the chief judge of Sherman, Texas, Amos Mazant, and his now magistrate. They had to bring in a magistrate because I am just producing so much evidence. It's overwhelming. And instead of hearing me, allowing me to have a hearing, or even addressing my motions, they are protecting PayPal and stalling. And it is happening, and it is a travesty. And none of the media, notice, are reporting on this
Mhm.
because it was, propaganda. They only wanted to report on negative things about me. And now that I have a case against PayPal and also a case against the prosecutor who threw me in prison, you don't hear anything from the media. But the media were also implicated because anyone who repeated my private financial information in the media, they are liable or can be held liable for doing that to me. And so it's a very complex case, but I'm managing it as a pro se litigant, and I will prevail. And they can't dismiss it. So they can't stall forever. But what they're doing is they're not, they're slow rolling it, like 6 months for a ruling, and not allowing me to have a hearing, and not taking me seriously, and then requiring me to follow all of the rules while they're not following any rules and PayPal's not following any rules, but I am being held back on a technicality. In Texas, you would never imagine Sherman, Texas being that way. And it's interesting because this has to do with FinCEN and FinCEN's orders to PayPal. And the judge himself, Judge Amos Mazant, in December ruled against FinCEN. So it's very contradictory to his own ruling. I mean, he is the one who stopped the reporting of small businesses to FinCEN. And he stopped that. But yet, when it comes to me, and I personally feel it is part of the reputational damage that was done to me by the Biden administration, by the federal government. So that could be it, or it could be it could just be the judge wants to protect PayPal. I don't know, but all I know is I'm not giving up. And the system is set in such a way as to make people stall out, give up, exhaust them. If you run out of money,
Yeah, that's the purpose of lawfare that the left enacts. I mean, they will have all types of agencies and people, mostly under the George Soros umbrella, that will help out the folks on their side. But for whatever reason, we don't have that type of reciprocity on our side when we have everything that is right and true on our side. So to me, there are two very overarching themes that come out of your case, Jenna. Number one, the collusion of government with private sector organizations to destroy their political opposition, to destroy American citizens. Yet we don't see that happening with the real domestic and national security threats by way of Trinidad members, MS-13 members, those supporting Hamas and Islamic terrorist organizations. They're perfectly fine. The second
right.
thing is that when I think about this whole argument that the left is trying to present, and I'm talking to you, Chris Van Hollen, quote unquote, senator from Maryland, illegals don't have any dadgum due process here in the United States of America, especially when they have come into the country illegally, which means they've committed a crime. You didn't commit a crime. You walked into a building, the United States Capitol, which your taxpayer funds goes to, have there and to operate, and then you walk back out. And the next thing you know,
Right.
you've got all of your due process, even up through this case and the decisions that are being made, completely violated. So as we get ready to wrap up, who do you think, should really be held accountable in this whole episode that you have had to experience?
I believe that we need reform on multiple levels. I think that the federal government needs to be held accountable so that they stop doing this. Um, we need to do something about arbitration laws and make improvements to the Federal Arbitration Act, which is privatization of the legal system. And just because you click accept in 2006 does not mean you have an eternal, you give up your constitutional rights for eternity, and that needs to be addressed. And I would love for attention to be placed upon my case, because public pressure can assist in making the judge sit up and say, wait a minute, I need to listen. I need to allow this woman a hearing. I need to look at her motions. My motions are being ignored. And the last thing I'm sending motions because I've got evidence. And the judge is like, I'm only going to look at 2 of your motions. And that's totally unlawful and it won't work. But it's just to stall. It's stalling me from getting justice, because I deserve my day in court before a jury and allow them to make the decision rather than being forced into arbitration, which is very much geared to protect big tech. And it's very harmful, not to mention it's been almost 3 years. And there comes a time, according to the Supreme Court in Morgan that came out in 2022, where if you haven't gone to arbitration in, 18 months or more, that the stay needs to be lifted and that person needs to be able to go to court. And I'm sitting at 30 months and PayPal's ignoring my claims, and the judge is stalling, and this is unconstitutional. And I would like public awareness and people to talk about this.
Well, I pray that someone forwards this segment to the American Center for Law and Justice. That's Jay Sekulowo's group, the Pacific Legal Foundation, and also the Thomas More Law Center up out of Michigan, because we've got to tackle this and we've got to expose this. And you need to have people that rally around and behind you. How can people follow you? How can people support you, Jenna Ryan, in your stand against this injustice?
What you can do is you can follow me on X at Real Jenna Ryan. I also have a Substack, and I do TikTok as well. And I just want you to know that I'm not stopping here. I am filing this particular lawsuit, and as soon as this one gets resolved in some way, then CBS, NBC, The Washington Post, Newsweek, whoever came after me and attacked me and tried to silence me and censor me, they're going to be held accountable. And that's my goal in life. And I would love people to rally and come on, let's do this, because it's about all of us.
Yeah, if they could do it to you, they can do it to anyone. And one of the things that I am very concerned about, we don't need to see a repeat of this. If we do not hold those people from the previous administration, the Biden administration, accountable, who's to say they won't ever try to do this again? So, Jenna Ryan, thank you so much for joining us here at the Steadfast and Law Podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, please follow Jenna's case, because this is not what 77 men took to the battlefield at Lexington back 250 years ago want to see happen in our United States of America. Remember the words of Thomas Paine. He said, it's the duty of a true patriot to protect his country from its government. We saw what the government can do to its own citizens. We cannot allow that to happen again. Thanks so much for watching this episode of Steadfast and Law Podcast. May God be with you, and always remain, as Jenna Ryan is, steadfast and loyal.
Before they burn it down.